Quote, thesis claimed the 1AC plays into liberalism's economy of victimhood, which circulates the stories of suffering by race bodies that allow white individuals to empathize momentarily with these lived experiences of violence and reaffirm their investment with the national structure, specifically true in the conscience of the 1AC, the Y1E. The invocation of the black mother asserting her identity against the world becomes interpolated by broader liberal structures as an instance of pulling yourself out of your bootstraps becomes repurposed for the insistence that the American dream is real and that all these women need a little love by the nation, which allows the continuation of neoliberal violence. We're not saying those things are true, but that is how the 1AC is interpreted by broader structures of liberalism, which arguments indicate that they do not take into account because those structures rely on the circulation of narratives of pain, not whether or not they are a narrative of suffering. Our point is that their narratives of the difficulty of living in an explicit situation become repurposed to affirm the qualities of the national ideal. That's a link argument that I don't think was responded to in the 1AC that they claim. This will never be in run impact. That's not true. First, there's no distinction between the fake world of debate and this world and the world out there. Our point is that these worlds are radically interconnected, which means that we are all elements of the circulation of these stories throughout liberalism, i.e. that debate is the structure of liberalism which allows these which allows these stories to circulate, and we have picked out the narrative presentation of the suffering. They are right that they live, all these questions that they exist. They all so read multiple pieces of statistical information that discuss the dying black children and the black men, the ones on death row. Those narratives become commodified circuit. They are the representative of the suffering and the pain of those others who they represent. Our point is that this is the ideal of aesthetic priesthood that they can stand in for these individuals to explain more about the role of the balance of the team that best provides a way to make debaters political while simultaneously engaging the role of the judge in response to our performances. Voting affirmative is not an affirmation of your humanity. That's the paradox of the position black humanity needs to affirm by Joe Shaffer's view. That doesn't make any sense to me. And if that's true, if you have to love yourself, you shouldn't have to confirm that self-love by some sort of exterior force, because then that self-love becomes a fake love, becomes part of the circulation of structurally impossible debate to have. If it's an affirmation in the first place, which means you should sever self-love from the ballot to Lawrence 6. She wants to be exempt from her worthless stars, but the wants to do honor to be paid with the people despite their general seed volunteer and if they respect her, they want to reign. One of them's one day she stopped singing from the living there was some huge scandal. Nobody gives a damn. It's not people of archives. There's no way one gives archive her art, strategy bar. The non-acceptable exception for her identity where no one wants to make them a great guy. The moment it makes its appearance, the difference is bungled by the judgment she brought about the moment she comes into which certain places a lot of certain limits are drawn to power, powerless, Josephine wants to place beyond the law beyond the public with the same. She wants her status to accept to be legally sanctioned, symbolically recognized, probably glorified. She wants to be inside and outside the law. She wants her you think to be recognized the moment our justice is done for the institution to break. It's circumscribing and accepting to be very well fitting within the rules of the artist who wants the recognition she will be forgotten, betrayed, the gallery memory, her voice which opens the track, betrayed, destroyed the very status of art just for a little while, but setting us free only helps to hear the best. The rest, all the better. The artist or mouse strategy fails to move by some success that transcends art could easily fit. And that's just one part of this bishop with the destructive carved gap for that to accommodate content continuity. All too easy. Now they see the permutation. The permutation is linked in form, not just content. It assumes cost-benefit calculation that you can pick which strategy is best based on analyzing which politics are better for you. That is the liberal subject. That's the world of whiteness where you can just choose different political strategies based on whatever you want, whatever you might be able to flow into. Our point is that is exactly how they will explain the performance of whiteness, which means this argument does not specifically link to us. They have said the debate should be like competing methodologies, which means we don't think it makes any sense to be able to say that we should just do both of these things at the same time. Instead, we should have a productive discussion about these different methodologies for engaging with the question of black suffering, black pain. Then we should decide on one of those methodologies over there. That's the only way for us to compete, because they don't read a plan. We agree that's a stupid kind of debate, but we do need other modes of competition in order to understand what debate looks like inside of that world. If we don't talk about the federal government, we do need to create different structures of competition. We shouldn't rely on those same old structures of inheritance from formativeness, because that is the worst form. That's a worst form because we inherit the previous failed forms of debate, which we don't think are good in the first place. Now they say that you should use their method to evaluate this debate situation. How? Our point is that putting it into the hands of Joe Schatz, putting it in the hands of white men, placing the victim economy of liberals, and they say you should take their method and do with it what you will. Our point is that you will do violence with it. That is what happens with the circulation of their methodology, with the circulation of the pain that you and other violent individuals will never engage in the reproduction of that for bad reasons. The attempt to include rejection and problematization of liberals and still endorses the affirmative, reaffirms their belief in the responsibility that reduces politics to morality and still relies on venomous and imperial compassion, which is always bad about intent. When talking liberals desire better attention to the suffering, they talk about the cruelty, ironically, cruel situation, river, the cruel discourse, that's cruelty, betrays the fetish of the accusations of suffering, serve never more political people, hard to the moral age and cost it. All sufferers automatically become victims will recognize one thing to claim that liberals cannot become subject centers and nothing understand the sovereign constitution subject matter by its own incurable boundary reduce all interactions, examining or correcting of all process liberalism will be incorporated liberalism that its acts every time of resistance is accommodated liberal colonize construction determine distribute the suffering and our criticism does not reject all compassion but problematize its use value in relation to that law defending compassion in the abstract is not sufficient to reject our criticism of the affirmative Berlin 2004. Readers might feel that to think about compassion as a social technology belonging to demean its authenticity and redemption of social life. This is especially acute in response to writing on what we call humanizing emotions. Scholarly critique does not necessarily entail the nullifying the value of an affirmative phrase project. Critique seeks not to destroy but to explain the dynamics of this optimism, not just call out for affirmation wrong but see how it works through that forms of progress at the same time support destructive practices kind of bargaining demands the scrutiny now the links make decisions first. If the white vampirism links this piece of Berlin and the circulation of narratives whether by the individual or about others allows them to circulate in the sentimental economy, whether it's on tapes among debaters, whether it's on the wiki, whether it's discussions on Facebook, even the simple repetition where they make these arguments multiple rounds. All these things become safe for the white spectrum because multiple people can come and they can watch all these rounds. They get used to it. They go, oh, Fresno State, I know what they do. That's the black motherhood team. Those are bad modes, but this is the inevitable in the structure of debate. The debate creates those inevitable forms of circulation that their individuals are. The radicality of a particular position is destroyed by its repetition, by this never repetition, which means it doesn't create the shocking value. Instead, it place to nullify, and it becomes a way for individuals to get a little bit of space on they can listen to a sort of emotional, they can listen to an emotional story, they can listen to a really well-performed poem, but those don't actually create the erotic potential anymore because they've been divorced from that possibility. Now we must reject the affirmative attempt to know a man is suffering literal appeals to empathy, even if you're right that you do feel the things when you hear their poems. I felt a lot of things when I heard the one at the end, the Tweety, but that does not mean that we have to act all at once. Our boss indicates we need to radically disconnect the idea that pain is existing from the idea that we can sympathize with it. This is the Boston 10. To build to a different end, how the judgment acting reactions among many others cannot help but reject constellation that comes from this code and all the certifications such as those pertaining to what suffering is and how we must decide how we must take the only one only is question the imperative these knowledge and searches both for all to examine the code utilitarian terms of God, transit powerless institutions, other conscriptions, sympathy, empathy, voice, and a desire for markedly different world, not picking liberal institutions, the purpose recruiters of various marginalities that power to set in terms of honoring suffering, the hope of others, not giving them the power to point out to this in a moment, as will noblesse by emphasizing how another something impenetrable and unknowable as much as this ethical noblesse opposed to letting be with others preservation first and foremost of oneself is important. You reject both the righteous or the tolerant pluralism of suffering and touching not versus seeming other intended. All takes in favor of seeing our sufferings other with this co-constituent world we have now. The second key link is the estate pre-tournament. I think this was mishandled in the Tweety. This one is important. They relate to their own experience, but they also become the symbolic figure for all of the wars waged against black mothers. That's the affirmative text in the one key. They also represent all of those individuals who were dying on death row, all of the black men and all the black children who were dying. They become strong enough by taking on all that pain and then representing it to us. Our point is that this feeds back and destructs the liberalism because that is exactly the picture that is painted of the black mother, i.e. that she is taking on all this pain and she's suffered too much in the system, but that either gets deployed by liberalism in order to maintain an idea of the American dream, i.e. that we can have hope and hopelessness, or else it gets stolen by conservatism and used as a reason why those women are in a bad situation in the first place, i.e. that they will never be going one of those directions. The point is that we should refuse the ability to even make that destination. That is the radical situation because it allows us to affirm an entirely separate situation outside of it, specifically negative in this context. The act calls for your empathetic identification with their narrative, and I didn't present and want to see this form of empathetic identification maintains an economy of senses, makes the black body fungible and captures to the white, recreated condition of opposites, Hartman 97. Empathy is the projection of recruiting oneself. Empathy makes the place covering himself. Every inch feels for himself by splitting the vulnerable, but a captive body is best for use of thoughts and feelings. Humanity extended slave, inadvertently confirming the expectations, desires, spin into the relation channel 70 empathetic identification is much used to an intensity, hard opposition, slave is fungible, the captive body, the effort, counteract commonplace, callous, black suffering requires that the white body be positioned, play the black body, make suffering visible and help empathy, and make the suffering one's own. The suffering is occluded by the other's obliteration, of course, the fancy reveals anxiety and making slave suffering medicalness, and anxiety is shortly determined by the denial of black senses, blood slaves, that's not property, the security of suffering is an instantiate, the obliteration of otherness, surpassed language, the nipple, and identification with the other, only as we feel ourselves in those we imagine ourselves, empathy fails to expand the space of the other, but make so the may level place ourselves ahead. Now the final question is the performativity argument. Look everyone, away. Yancey suggests that by pointing out a white individual allows them to forefront their whiteness. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I am the white debater in this debate situation. That's important for us to understand. That comes with a lot of privilege. I go to Harvard, which gives me access to both travel funds and countless opportunities, as well as the generic privilege of not being a white body. I am, however, not a normative body because no such thing exists, which is why I can still be assaulted on the streets of Cambridge for looking queer. That's not a reason to vote for me, but it's a reason their narrative overcoats identity inside of static understanding based on vision. Our point is that all of us have multiple forms of suffering, but those cannot become the reasons to justify for a cause. Instead, we must radically reject the idea that Joe can understand or empathize with any of the lived experiences that any of us have before. Now, performance is not a mode of resistance. It gives too much power to the audience because the performer is structurally blocked from controlling the representation of the representation of the feeling on 96. Performance is only lectured in the present. Performance cannot participate in circulation, representation degree that performance comes in good circuit. The economy reproduction portrays less the promise of its own. The first brought to bear on the performance to come to laws of a very reproductive economy are enormous for only rarely in the cultures and now which performance rests the deepest question value to the human of a performance and only spur to memory for the memory to become rested in the very act of articulating why a performance ought to be attached to the valid cap. The performance within the terms of liberalism discourse of economy reduces their performance to a form of aesthetic formalism. Feeling 96. For oral interpretation, representation, power force, and understanding practice, what it costs us here in this place for oral interpretation, increasing objectification, our practice, objectification, our practice, and by objectifying our practice, we mean the conceptual artist representation includes the examination of the very activity represented cause the field of containing the rapid disciplinary technique through the accumulation of knowledge exercise power through interpretation instead of focusing on the eroticization of performative practice itself. Okay, I'll take a drink. That's alright.
Okay, first question. How does our performance initiate a mode of resistance? Like when do we say we're trying to have a form of resistance?
Sir, can you rephrase?
You talk about performance as a mode of resistance. Like, how does that make sense?
Well, the argument that you make that the debate should be centered around the question of performance, those cards indicate that.
When did we say that? That's what you said, right? We said political agency. When did we say performance?
The political agency, we talked about what does it mean to perform in the 1AC cross-examination, that's what I was getting at there.
We didn't, and we specifically said we're not defending performance.
I understand. I'm not saying that you all were like dancing around and that that's a bad point.
No, I'm saying.
My point is that more generically, performances of any sort, whether they are linguistic, i.e. communicative performances, just us talking or reading, any of those performances rely on when we explain what they mean to another individual, that's a bad form of conflict.
Okay, quick question. So in the last speech, you're not going to explain explain why he should vote for you? I just need to know this, because if so, that's going to be very good for us.
No, that's different. The point is not that we can't explain why Joe should vote for one team or the other. It's more that if we've engaged in certain forms of performativity, we shouldn't explain what they mean.
So why
This is a
a
defensive argument more than an offensive argument, if that makes it easier. I'm not saying that this is inevitably something we've done. It's more that if you say we haven't done something...
Are you going to talk over it? Is my process? Okay, cool. Thank you. Can you explain this fungibility argument, like with the other type thing?
Yeah, so the Hartman evidence indicates that when we attempt to make the slave suffering something that the white individual can empathize with...
Hold on. When did you say anything about slave suffering?
This evidence is metaphoric for the engagement with the black body in general. The Hartman evidence indicates that when we talk about the captive body as a vessel for thoughts...
When did we say anything about the captive body?
About prisons. What are you talking
Not
about?
only did you talk about prisons, but you also talked about...
That's okay. That's cool. That's alright. That's fine. Okay, when you say black mothers take on all the pain, what do you mean? Like, if we say statistics, because that was from the Malcolm X grassroots movement, then all of a sudden we take on that pain? Because we say statistics?
Yeah, that's certainly one reason you do, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Now, you talk about how narratives and stuff like that is bad. Can you explain that? Wait, what's my first question? Figuring that most of the debaters are, most of the judges are white males, how should we be able to talk about the things that we want to talk about?
I don't know. I mean, you said I shouldn't tell you how to beat you. I also don't think I could possibly tell you how to debate.
Well,
I do, however...
You make an argument specifically that he should not be evaluated.
How... I think that's something I'm justified in saying. I can talk about how white individuals...
Because you're able to talk about...
Yeah, it is. That's my point. I'm the white guy, and I'm talking about what Joe and I could do as white individuals. It's unethical for us to say we understand...
How would into this compassion?
What?
How would into this compassion?
1AC reads a series of poems, discussions, all of which ask for a form of compassion from the judge. Even if it's just self-love, you require the confirmation, which is external.